Hello, everyone, and welcome to Clean Water Conversations, the podcast where we have casual discussions about creating clean and clear waterways right here in Lancaster County. I'm Ken.
And I'm Allison.
Well, Allison, we have arrived.
We've arrived.
Kind of.
Okay. Yes, we're kicking off this podcast with a special interview with Chris Thompson, the manager of the Lancaster County Conservation District, who was one of the founders of the Lancaster Clean Water Partners.
That's right. And he's going to tell us about the origins of the Clean Water Partners and the why and how behind its foundation.
Yeah, this is a slightly different style of discussion than what you're going to hear in future episodes.
So instead of calling this episode 1, we're calling it Origins.
But with some of the fun elements found in this episode, like icebreakers and trivia, they will continue.
And the rule against acronyms without explanation. The conservation world uses a lot of acronyms. And for those of us who are new to the conservation world, we might not always know what those letters mean. So when one of our guests or even one of us uses an acronym without explaining what those letters mean, you'll hear this. And we will stop and ask them to explain.
With those little housekeeping items out of the way, let's get right into the origins of the Lancaster Clean Water Partners with Chris Thompson.
Our very first guest here is Chris Thompson. He is the district manager of the Lancaster County Conservation District. He was one of the founders of the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about how this whole thing got started. So, Chris, welcome to Clean Water Conversations.
Thanks, Ken. Glad to be here.
And we're going to start out with an icebreaker. So little question just to kind of get inside your head a little bit. The question is, if some big Hollywood producer were to come here and make a movie about conservation efforts here in Lancaster County, who would you want to play you and why?
Stop. Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson.
There you go.
Can you do the accent? No, me neither. I
no.
can't do it either. No, that's
Nope.
okay. So, Chris, tell us about your background. Where did you start? Were you always interested in the environment?
Sure. Going back as even a kid, I grew up on a farm in Delaware County, small farm, and even at that point, it was really a gentleman's farm. We had 4 generations living there, but my family always cared about the land, the soil, and the community. And even my grandfather would take us fishing on the bay. Didn't realize the connection I'd have later in life, but he would take us there and just tell us how important it was to take care of the bay and to enjoy it, but also to take care of it. So that experience as a child really laid the groundwork for both caring about the environment, but also about the community that you live in. And the job I have now really helps to bring those passions together.
So what brought you to Lancaster County Conservation District?
Well, I started back in 1990 I had a business of my own. It was a retail flower shop and landscape business. And I loved what I did. I loved interacting with people, working with nature in that regard. But I was so busy with my work, I didn't get to work in the community. And in 2008, when the economy started dropping, I was looking for what else I could do and saw a job posted with York County for the assistant manager at the Conservation District. And the job description was everything that really fit who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I applied for that and received that job, not really knowing anything about a conservation district, but just appreciated the overall goal and service that they provided to the community. And as I started in that job, just learned to appreciate all that a conservation district does. Every county has a conservation district, and yet they really fly under the radar. Most people don't even know that they exist, and yet what they do truly impacts every person in their county. And so I worked there for about 7-8 years, and then the manager position came open here in Lancaster County. I knew Don McNutt and had worked with him on a few things, and he kept encouraging me to apply. But that was pretty intimidating. Lancaster's everything happens in Lancaster, and I didn't feel like I was ready for it. He asked me to just fill out an application so the headhunter knew what to look for in a manager, and so I did. And the next week they called me to come in and apply, and I did grudgingly. Long story short, there's no looking back. It's probably the best move I ever made. Everything's possible here in Lancaster County. Just the attitude of the people, the residents. It's a great staff, an engaged board of directors. It's a determined people or residents that really want to get things done.
Now, I mentioned at the intro part there that you were one of the founders of Lancaster Clean Water Partners. This is a short question with a long answer, I'm sure. But what was the impetus behind creating Lancaster Clean Water Partners?
So in 2014, when I came into Lancaster as the district manager, first thing I did was, of course, you want to make a big impression and really try and stand out from your predecessor. And not that he did anything wrong. It was all really great. But everywhere around Lancaster, we kept hearing how Lancaster's the problem. If you don't fix Lancaster, nothing's going to be successful as far as a clean bay. And so first thing I did was meet with our district watershed specialist, who was Matt Koffroth. And I said, Matt, what do you know about the watersheds here? And he had a long-time employee here and extensive knowledge of every watershed group. He told me what the low-hanging fruit was, where you could really make some progress as far as cleaning up local water. So we started creating this priority list, and I kept running into funding challenges. Funding is an issue, capacity, people, technology, skills. We just kept running into one problem after another, and so that didn't diminish the drive to make a difference, but it just said we have to go a different way. I started, this is again 2014, 15, we started meeting with EPA officials, also known as Environmental Protection Agency. They had been talking about the Bay, Pennsylvania not doing enough, and they started to talk about backstop options, which would be increased regulations, federal regulations and inspections that would really ratchet down on primarily agriculture, and because they were seeing agriculture as the prime culprit, but also the best opportunity for making the biggest impact. If you can address pollution issues on the farm, it'll help expedite that whole cleanup process for our local water. So I had gone to the county commissioners at the time and explained some of the concerns that I saw, some of the red flags about the direction EPA was going, and primarily that Pennsylvania at the time was not stepping up to the plate to do enough. And I said, if Lancaster, independent of the state, Lancaster needs to show we're taking control of taking this issue seriously, and we're doing what we can to clean up our local water. Around that time, the Conservation District had started, we had part of our 2016 planning meeting was how do we turn our red streams blue? We were trying to figure out how we can expand our capacity to really address the clean water issues in the county. Again, we ran into those same issues: funding for staff, regulatory responsibilities from state delegations, and we just could not seem to generate the manpower to take on this new initiative, and which gave even more opportunity for the Clean Water, at the time, the Clean Water Committee, to continue to advance and grow and take on some more of that responsibility for getting the vision for Lancaster's clean waters to be adopted by the whole community. As it progressed, we secured funding from the Keith Campbell Foundation. We were looking for, or if we have funding for people, what is the person going to do? And at that time, we were looking for one person, a coordinator, to help just amplify the messaging and the initiative to make sure it's a countywide effort. So after meeting with the Keith Campbell Foundation, as far as asking them about providing funds for this Clean Water Initiative, one of the criteria that they have is that they operate through 501c3s. And thankfully, the Conservation District several years ago had started a 501c3 foundation for conservation efforts here in the county. And it's the Conservation Foundation of Lancaster County specifically. And so the funding that was received for the partners effort comes through our foundation. So part of that arrangement that we had with the Conservation Foundation employing the Clean Water Partners staff, we have a service agreement between the foundation, the partners, and the Conservation District to really facilitate and be clear about what is expected and required of that interaction between our different teams. At that same time, Commissioner Lehman had called together a small group. And actually, it started with Lisa Riggs, who is the director of the Community Economic Development Corporation here in the county, to address that issue, because if the backstop options were implemented, it would really restrict any kind of business growth or economic development. And so Lisa reached out to a couple different folks in the county, other movers and shakers, Mike Peachy, Heather Valutis, and myself, to talk about how do we address the clean water issue at a local level. And Commissioner Lehman was a part of that group, and we met for a few weeks and started to create this Clean Water Committee. I had gone to Virginia, talked with the Keith Campbell Foundation representatives, and identified some funding for an initiative and for a person to help move the whole effort forward. As the discussions continued to develop, Lisa Riggs reached out to John Cox, and who at the time was the president of Turkey Hill Dairies, and asked him to become involved with the idea this is not just an initiative that a small committee can undertake. We're trying to change how the county is responding. We needed some real people well connected in the community, real movers and shakers. And so Lisa reached out to John, and he became the kind of the lead or the chair of this small group, and helped to really lay out some strong foundation for where this the Clean Water Committee could start to go. Back in the summer of 2017, the Clean Water Committee expanded again to include additional representatives from the community: Charlotte Katzenmoyer, Joe Sweeney, Lowell Fry, Matt Royer, and Peter Hughes. At that time, we met with Beth Langman of Due East Partners, and we began creating that framework that eventually became the Clean Water Partners. Matt Kaufroth and myself and Matt Royer began developing a NIFWIF, which is National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, a great funder for so many conservation projects throughout the region. And we began developing a proposal that pulled together, I think it was about 18 different projects that fit very nicely into that whole Clean Water Initiative. And that paired with the Keith Campbell Foundation for a Person really created a package deal. We had if we had funding for people and funding for projects that would allow the Clean Water Committee to really begin doing something and accomplishing some of those fundamental steps in the process of establishing not only projects on farms and in the community, but also a clean water fund that would allow for the receipt of additional funding to get more projects done on the ground. It established the opportunity to create different committees in the county that would help to move it all forward. But we still needed a person to help lead that. And so early in 2018, towards the end of 2017, we had started interviews, but early in 2018, we hired Allison Gibson, who on this sitting here at the table, and to lead the charge as far as the Clean Water Coordinator at the time. And I think Allison had a steep learning curve as far as what was happening relative to clean water in the county. But based on her presentation skills and just her personality, she really has been able to take that what started as a very small committee I say a very big vision, but a very small committee. She's been able to help take that have the impact that it has today.
So yeah, Chris mentioned that I started in January of 2018. And Chris, when I arrived, there were draft documents. There was a thing called a common agenda. It didn't have all the metrics filled in, but it had a lot of strategic work that went into creating that. So can you explain kind of that small group? Like, what was the thought process behind the framework that was chosen? And you mentioned that the people coming together really knew where they wanted to go, but how you operationalized that showed up in a few key pieces or a few key documents.
Right. Thank you. Early on, as the Clean Water Committee was growing, we were encouraged by the Keith Campbell Foundation to formalize ourselves into an organization itself, still housed within the conservation district as far as the host entity, but creating a separate identity. And they connected us with a group out of Annapolis called Due East. And so we had a few planning sessions with Due East, and they really helped to formalize and organize us as an independent group, us being the Clean Water Partners. We spent a long time talking about a name and a logo. They really, again, helped to formalize the Clean Water Partners. They also helped to create the common agenda that helped to establish not only who the partners are, but where they're going and where they need to go. And so that committee that turned into a steering committee eventually became known as the Clean Water Partners. After hiring Allison, you use that as the framework and the driver for where we were going, and it's really produced a very positive result throughout the county.
Yeah, that was a really important tool, and I remember the language that was originally part of it was that it would be clean and clear in our generation, or in a generation. And that was the question that we got was, well, whose? Is that yours? Is that mine? Is that my grandkids' generation? So defining that, I think, was one of the first things that the group had to tackle. And I mentioned that the metrics and the numbers that are always hard to get to when you're thinking of community-wide improvements. But even that definition, like, people shy away from wordsmithing things as an entire group, but trying to get a vision statement. Tell me a little bit about what was the struggle there? What were some of those conversations like?
It's kind of a funny thought to think of it now, but right, we were intentionally ambiguous about what that really meant because it was such a big lift. We really didn't know what it would take or what the success would look like. At the time, we were working with the state, again, with that reboot strategy, creating a CAP or the countywide action plan. This is in 2018, and they were giving us numbers of reductions, like 11 million pounds of nitrogen and a couple 100,000 pounds of phosphorus. We had no idea how. So they were telling us the goal, but they weren't telling us anything about how to get there. And so it was really a nebulous idea of what we could do. So we were intentional about saying, sometime in the future, the water will be clean. We don't know how we're getting there yet. But as you said, Allison, more and more the public was saying, well, how do we measure success? How are we going? What are we shooting for? How are we going to do this? So we did narrow that goal, that objective down to within this generation or within the 40-year. And a lot of that also aligned with what the county planning commission was doing. And so there were just many other opportunities to build on what other partners, little p partners around the county were doing to help demonstrate that this isn't one group trying to usurp authority or override anyone else. It's meant to be a collaborative effort that pulls everybody together with common goals, common agendas to build on that success and really make progress and expedite progress. Because, again, going back to the original intent, we had to show that we were being effective and successful at a rate that was faster than anything we had done to date.
Yeah, and that shift from saying that clean and clear was going to be within a generation to clean and clear by 2040. That process itself, just as you said, bringing in existing work that had been happening for a long time. The County Comprehensive Plan of Places 2040. The work that the Clean Water Partners as this collaborative entity was doing was happening alongside what the state was saying had to happen by 2025. It wasn't that one was getting rid of or more important than the other, but that they were happening alongside. We have this milestone in front of us with what the state is saying, but then Lancaster's got a bigger vision. We're looking ahead at 2040 and the realistic implementation of the things that showed up as the priorities and strategies on that common agenda. Chris, you mentioned that the district and the partners' missions are really aligned. And currently, the partners' staff are conservation district employees that offer to house them and have a service agreement, and then have the independent organization of the Clean Water Partners exist separate from the district. It's a really unique setup. Can you give us a little bit of insight about the why and the build up to that kind of relationship?
Well, it's actually a very interesting relationship. The Clean Water Partners staff are actually considered, or they are, conservation district employees that get leased back to the Clean Water Partners. One of the reasons that the Clean Water Partners is housed within the Conservation District was that one of the initial goals or objectives of the steering committee was to make sure that the Clean Water Partners was a nimble organization that was able to operate very efficiently without a lot of overhead. And if you have staff, there's a lot of administrative oversight that's needed, and that can be expensive. It felt like a natural fit for the committee to have the Clean Water Partners housed within the district because of the overlapping mission and goals and objectives that we shared in common. And it allowed for that efficiency, both cost effectiveness and efficiency, for being in the same space.
So, Chris, where do you see how do you see the Clean Water Partners continuing to evolve over time? I feel like between the Conservation District, the Conservation Foundation, the Clean Water Partners, we really have a great collaborative team effort to approaching our clean water efforts in the county, where we each have our specialized skills and abilities and are helping to move clean water forward in a variety of different ways. The Clean Water Partners are tackling aspects of the community outreach that the district never could reach, and they're really helping to not only be the driver for pulling partners together, little p partners together, but also helping to help facilitate with a lot of what the district's trying to do by providing either applying for some funding, but also providing manpower and resources to really help us accomplish our common goals of making our county better or improving the county and helping us all to clean up our local water.
Well, is there something about either Clean Water Partners or the Conservation District that makes you the most proud?
A few years ago, we started to document improved water quality in some of the local streams. This really is a result of many years of upstream work by the district and many other conservation partners. What excites me about this is that with the common agenda, it's really pulling together all the various partners into a common goal. We're working together and really amplifying each other's work to get more done. So I am excited to say that as we've delisted about 3 or 4 miles of streams in the recent years, I think in the very near future, we're going to see even more streams delisted quicker. It still takes a long time to get that recognition, but it does. The fact that we're building on past successes and doing it even more effectively, it's got to result in better and cleaner streams sooner.
Chris, can you give us a little bit of a description about what delisting is? You've used that term, and I think sometimes it can almost be an acronym on its own. So, clarify for us what that means. Sure.
So currently in Lancaster County, we have about 1,400 miles of streams in the county, and more than half, by some studies, close to 80% of those streams are considered impaired, which is they don't either sustain, they're not fishable, swimmable, drinkable, or some level of impairment. In in order to delist a stream, extensive work has to be done in that stream to fortify it as far as putting in protective BMPs that limit the kind of BMP. So extensive efforts need to go. When you have a stream that's impaired, a lot of effort needs to be exerted to implement BMPs or best management practices. And whether that's on a farm where you're installing a buffer or a swale, a waterway that keeps or a manure pit, whatever it is that's going to keep the nutrients and sediment from running into the stream, those are just a sampling of the BMPs that need to be installed. If it's a municipality, any of the BMPs that are addressing stormwater and runoff, it's that kind of a protection that we need to implement in order to start to help the stream turn around. And the way nature and the way the streams are designed, if you reduce the amount of inputs, the negative inputs, they have this mechanism to help restore. They start to restore themselves, and so as we reduce the inputs, the negative inputs, and start to restore the positive, they begin to heal themselves, and that delisting. We have several different volunteer monitoring groups. We have several monitors, which is the equipment that we use is called a sonde, and that is a equipment that goes right into the stream. It measures the several different components of the stream, but the basic ones are sediment, dissolved oxygen, as well as the different nutrients. And as those markers start to reduce, it reaches certain trigger points where the volunteer organizations they track that over years, and as those numbers start to come down, you can start to then identify the healthy bugs, the macroinvertebrates that are help to restore a stream. The more the healthy markers start to increase, there's certain trigger points where our watershed team then will alert DEP, or Pennsylvania's Department of Environmental Protection, the water quality managers, to come down and do a stream survey. And then they begin to do that fine tuning or that fine analysis to really document whether a stream has achieved a certain health level. And so we do all that we can to lead up to that delisting, but DEP themselves are the ones that after they have done that final monitoring and final determination, they're really the only ones here in Pennsylvania that can delist a stream or take it off of that impaired list. And there are different gradients in that impairment, but it all starts with the monitoring. We try to do some monitoring before we do projects to see how unhealthy a stream is, but also to measure progress and success. We measure the stream and see where it is currently, do the projects, and then monitor again post-project to see, and that happens over years. Do that post-project monitoring to see how the stream is being positively impacted by the work that was done upstream. Once we reach those good indicators, DEP comes down. They will do their stream assessment and surveys. And again, they're ultimately the ones that would delist or take the stream off that impaired list.
Very good. Well, that's all the questions we have for right now. So I am going to go into a segment. This is conservation lightning round trivia. I don't know how well this is going to work, but we're going to give it a try. I'm going to put 30 seconds on the clock and ask you a series of questions. We'll see how many of them you can answer in 30 seconds.
Okay.
This should be interesting. So here we go. In what year was the EPA formed?
1970.
There you go. And which president created the EPA?
Would have been Richard Nixon.
It was indeed Richard Nixon. When did the Clean Water Act pass?
Clean Water Act, 72?
Yes.
Oh.
A single tree in its lifetime produces enough air to supply how many people with oxygen for a year?
It's a tough one.
That is a tough one.
15,000.
Ooh. It's actually 4. What % of the Earth's water is fresh water?
I'm going to say 12%.
Ooh,
Smaller.
less than 2%. And I'm going to cut right to the last one here. Which was named first, the Conestoga River or the Conestoga Wagon?
I would think the river, but
It was indeed the river. Good job.
Indeed.
You did really well with those. There's some really tough ones in there. I'm really impressed with how well you did with those. Well, hey, that is the time that we have. We are going to be back in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much, Chris. We really appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Ken.
Good to hear the
And-
history.
Yes, that was very cool. And we will be back. Until then, take care.
Bye-bye.